Hi folks, my name is Jimbo Snyder. Welcome to my home, welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to talk about steaks. I made several videos for people who just starting out, don't know exactly that much about food, so I'll hopefully get something out of these. I've tried to make this short. I know so much about this stuff. I used to, be in the restaurant business as long as I was. I cooked a whole bunch of steaks in my life, and buying them and knowing what to buy and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to get into too much detail because it would just bore you. But basically, let me tell you about the grades of beef. Beef is graded. Actually, a guy goes to a meat packing plant and he grades the beef. He doesn't. That's not the USDA inspector now. The inspector makes sure the meat is safe, but the grader tells you how good the beef is as far as quality is concerned. And prime is the best, choice is next, and then select is the next one down. Anything below that, good commercial cutter, you don't want to buy that anyway. It's not worth it. I could maybe make hamburger out of it. But the cow, you have to know something a little bit about the cow to know where the steaks are coming from. And I've got a video coming up that shows you the parts of the cow. And you'll notice that there's a picture of a cow and it's all different kind of cuts on there. Those are what we call primal cuts. And from the primal cut, we get the different cuts of beef and stuff like that. The forward end of the cow, that's the chuck. And then as you get towards the hind quarters, that's where all your steaks come from, about the middle to the back, towards the hind quarter. Now, there are three different types of steaks. There's a ribeye, there's a tenderloin, and then there's a New York strip, what it's called a strip steak, but it's been basically known as New York strip. Don't know why. Maybe they made it famous. You'll also hear about Delmonico's. Now, Delmonico was a steakhouse in New York City that actually was serving a ribeye steak, and they called it Delmonico, for what it's worth. So anyway, we got this chart over here. You'll see that in the next video. And I also went to the grocery store and took some videos of different cuts of meat. The videos are it's hard to hear me talk because you hear the sound of the refrigerator. But to get into that, let's talk about the different cuts. And I'm trying to do this as fast as I can because I get a little long-winded. You got the ribeye, and that's, well, let's start with the most tender. The most tender cut of the cow is the tenderloin. Now, the tenderloin is pricey. It's only this long and about that big around. You only get so many steaks out of it per cow, so obviously it's more expensive. As far as I'm concerned, I have no use for the tenderloin. It's tender, just like it says, but it's the least flavorful part of the cow. The way the cow brings its flavor out is the muscle that uses the cow that uses that muscle the most, that has the most flavor. But you get into the round and that kind of stuff, it's too tough to eat, and you need to use moist heat cooking method. So the other steaks that we buy are the ribeye and the New York strip. Now the ribeye comes from the center of the cow, and obviously it's where the ribs are. The ribeye is also known as where you get the prime rib. You can't buy prime rib, and I'll explain to you why. And then you're going to be buying the ribeye steak. And then right behind that on the cow is the strip loin. And that's a little more tougher than the ribeye, but both of them, they're edible. So don't think it's so tough you can't eat it. Now, in the grocery store, you probably you'll be lucky if you get choice, but you're not going to get prime. And it was explained to me, I went to buy prime for the steakhouse, and the meat purveyor said, "You can't buy prime." I said, "Why?" So, "Is my money no good?" He said, "No, it's not your money. This is New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, the biggest cities buy all the prime there is in the United States. Because it's only about 10% of the cows produced can grade out to be prime." So that was back in the 80s. Now it's probably different today. I think you can go online and get it delivered right to your house if you want to play the price, because you can imagine how much more expensive that would be. So anyway, the grocery store, you're probably going to get selects, and that's 3 grades down from in the meat grading process. But it's still a good grade. Don't worry about it. It just doesn't have basically what they're looking at is the speckles of fat that's in the muscle of the cow, and that's called marbling. And the more speckles of fat you see in the meat, the better the grade usually. Now, you're going to notice the videos that I'm going to show you that I've put pictures of. There's not a lot of speckles of fat in the meat, and that's the selects. They don't have choice at this particular store. Now, they do have Black Angus. That's a whole different breed of cow. And usually out of Black Angus, they're bigger cows. And usually they carry a little bit more fat on them. So therefore, you get more of the choice and prime steaks come out of Angus. Now, they have them for sale, like for example at this Piggly Wiggly where I can shop. But I'm not interested in paying a price for something like Black Angus. But I'll show you some pictures of Black Angus and maybe you can tell the difference. Now, let me explain to you about prime rib. Prime rib is the ribeye loin. It's just cut and prepared a little differently. When they cut the prime rib out of the cow, or let's just say that particular cut of meat, they leave the ribs on, and the cow is covered with this fat covering that most of the time they take that off to start cutting the steaks with. But they leave it, they cut it back and they off of the loin, but then they lay it back over the loin, the ribeye. And then they put a mesh netting on there to hold everything together. When we get it in a restaurant, I just cover it with salt and pepper. The whole thing with just salt and pepper. And then I bake it in the oven, and we bring it up to about 120, and take it out. It continues to cook as you take it out. I don't care what you cook. It continues to cook. And it may go up to 125 or so, about medium rare. And then when we go to cut it and we take the fat off, we throw that away. We do cook it with the net on, so it all holds together. The reason that fat is put back over on the loin is that as it cooks, that fat flavoring actually gets into the meat. And that's why I cook a loin for Christmas, and you can't get the same flavor the way I cook it, or not the way I cook it, but because it doesn't have that fat on top, it will not have the same flavor as a prime rib you buy at a restaurant. But that's the reason you as an individual can't buy prime rib. You probably don't want to, because it's going to come as a whole rib, and it weighs, probably about 25 pounds. So you probably don't have any use for that. Even the standing rib roast, you still don't have that fat covering over it that gives it the flavor that you're looking for. So, for what it's worth. So that's about all I can say about the different types of steaks and stuff like that. Now, the next video you're going to see is going to be where the meat comes from and stuff like that. And then I've got videos that actually take you to the grocery store, and I shot a few of them. They're kind of hard to hear, but hopefully they'll give you some idea. Then I'll come back at the end and tell you more about it. Okay, folks, this is basically cut out of the cow, where all the different cuts come from. And right in here is your ribeye. And also the prime rib is the same thing. So I'll kind of explain that to you. And then this, right behind it, right in here, is the strip loin. Now the reason the tenderloin's coming in here, I'm going to show you a T-bone steak. On one side of the bone is a tenderloin, on the other side of the bone is a New York strip. So that's the reason they are showing the tenderloin in there like that. Now as we get back up into here, this is where you get your sirloins. You get your top sirloin, bottom sirloin in here. So anyway, you don't run into sirloin steaks, but I'm sure you've heard of top sirloin steak, and that's usually actually in the steakhouses we served a sirloin steak, and actually it's a pretty good little steak. And I've noticed one in Outback they had, but I didn't think it was all that good. But as the ribeye, on this end of the ribeye, you'll see an extra muscle come in. That belongs to the chuck. And then on this end, there is no extra muscle, and this is where you get all your center cut. And now the strip loin that you see steaks cut out of is on this side of the cow, and the tenderloin is actually on the other side, on the inside of the cow. So that'll give you some idea of where all this stuff comes from, and your flank and your rounds and the shank. So that'll give you some idea. The muscles that get the most use are these back muscles right in here and right in here, and they are the toughest steaks. These obviously they get the least amount of work, so they're the tenderer cuts. I know the Jews, they are not allowed to eat this part of the cow because there are arteries that run through the chuck, and they can't eat meat that has an artery in it. For trivia, a little bit of trivia for you. So anyway, I hope that'll explain to you where they come from. Okay, here's a ribeye. You see the fat in here, just a speckle. That's your marbling. You can see one here, a little bit there and there. Doesn't have a lot. I can see a little bit more marbling than that. I want to show you a T-bone. This is actually a New York strip in here. And this is tenderloin over on this side. So they're getting thick on what's called a porterhouse. New York strip, and this is a good one. You can see only one muscle here. It's got some marbling in here. Alright, this is what you don't want to buy. See this right in here? That's what we call a vein. And it looks kind of like marbling, but it's not. You can see it right over here. That's your vein steak. We'll stay away from that. That will be tough. Alright, this is the meat counter. We have Black Angus. These are tenderloin. Here's your ribeye. These look really nice. They have a lot of marbling in them. If you notice that muscle coming in on the side over there,
That's going into the chuck. I don't see a center cut in this batch. This is a bone-in type of ribeye. You get over here, this is your T-bone. You can see the tenderloin muscle and the New York strip muscle in there. And then these are just your strips. And this is one muscle. So this is a center cut. And there are no vein states coming in here. This is a whole ribeye. And just above it is tenderloin. This whole ribeye has a loin in, and over here would be a chuck in. And I can explain that to you in a picture. And this is where your prime rib comes from. It's from this whole loin, except it'll have the bone in. And I'll explain the difference between just the loin and the what we call a 109 rib.
Well, I hope those videos were educational for you. There's one thing I didn't mention in the beginning that I want to tell you about now. In some of the videos, they showed you a T-bone steak. You know, the T-bone is actually shaped of a T. On the left side, the smaller little muscle that you see, that's tenderloin. And the longer muscle on the other side is the strip loin. Now, when you see a T-bone steak in a grocery store, you're going to see that tenderloin. The strip loin will probably stay the same size. But that tenderloin will be larger and smaller depending on where it was cut out of the cow. So always look for the T-bone that has that larger tenderloin muscle. Otherwise, you're cheating yourself. Because don't buy because they're going to have some of there. There's an old tiny thing over here. I don't have any use for that. So, and the porterhouse is just a bigger T-bone and has a bigger tenderloin and a bigger strip loin and it's thicker. So you can actually get one thick enough and go to your meat purveyor and meat man and ask him, can he cut you a porterhouse steak that's, let's say, at least an inch or inch and a half thick. And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But depends on your grocery store, depends on your meat purveyor. Or your meat monger, they call it. I don't like that. As far as the ribeye is concerned, a ribeye has a single muscle when you get back towards the strip, and it has two muscles as it gets towards the chuck. The large, you'll notice in my video, I'll have two muscles. The second muscle that's sort of on top of that steak, that's actually tenderer than the actual loin muscle of the ribeye, and it usually has a little, I don't know how to describe, maybe, well, a pocket of fat. Now, most guys love the fat. I mean, I do. Most women I know don't like the fat. So they eat one end of the loin, we eat the other end. I just think the fat tastes great. It's probably bad for me, but how often am I going to be eating a steak every night? No. So, anyway, shoot, as far as that goes, the hamburger has fat in it. And so anyway, I hope that was educational for you. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions or anything like that, leave me a message at my email, jimboskitchen.knowhow@gmail. I have some information on my Facebook page, Jimbo's Kitchen Know-How, etc. And if you have any comments, leave them below the video and hit that like button. I'd appreciate that. And folks, be safe out there and come back and see me.